social media and content or other, and I asked them to describe what that was. 0% said competitor research, which I was completely shocked about, that nobody invested their budget into competitor research, which, considering that, big businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses have all been impacted, you're trying to get a competitor advantage. It's a recession-style, economy. The more you invest into your marketing, the larger your market share will be, the better you will come out of it in the long run. So if you're not worried about what your competitors are doing, then you might miss a trick or miss an opportunity and get left behind. So I was surprised by that. But the biggest response came, 67% said they were going to invest in social media and content. So I think a lot of strategy is going to come through that. And the only way they need to know what to do is, I think, data analytics. And data analytics covers a whole breadth of elements we can discuss. But I think more of it is online data analytics and understanding who your customers are and what that segment brings. And it kind of overlaps with another trend, which is, personalization and, web experiences that consumers have on websites. Is the more you know about your customers through data analytics, the more you can start tailoring content towards them. It's no point creating a blanket content approach for all your customers, especially depending on the sector you're in, whether it's B2B or B2C. If you have B2C, you're going to have customers of different ages, gender, different personalities, characteristics, different interests. And that's just looking at, let's say, one sector in particular, let's say fashion, or whether that's, furniture or retail. You need to really start integrating. And that's where I think the biggest problem is going to come on. Without strategy and understanding how to plan that content and segmenting that data, will businesses know? A lot of questions I get asked, and the reason I mention this is, how should we move forward as a business when we're prospecting? We have a lot of clients coming up saying we're looking to grow into 2021. We're seeing some success, but we don't know where it's coming from. And all that's going to come from understanding your data. Platforms like Google Analytics, understanding the in-platform data from Google Ads, YouTube, your social engagements, how many video views you've had, what kind of video content was being consumed more, all the way through to, Facebook, LinkedIn, data, including, platforms like Search Console. What are the, search terms that customers looking for to find you during this period? We saw a big rise in the terms COVID-19 around 2020 in terms of being added on as a search term towards the end. So understand your data analytics, understand what search terms are driving people to your traffic, understand who is visiting your website, create 2, 3, 4, as many segments as you can. I'm going to give one example of how we've done that with a client. A client is called Comfy Homes, home furniture client based in West Yorkshire, Wakefield. We're working with a partner platform, Pure Clarity, which allows personalizations, and we've segmented those customers by those that have viewed particular products, those that are new to the website, those that are existing customers, those that have only purchased once, those that we class as VIP customers, so purchase frequently throughout the year and visit the site often. And every time a customer goes to that site, they have a completely different experience compared to that. And this is what I'm trying to say is a new customer sees a completely different homepage image gallery at the same time when an existing customer would go back. And we know that, and we know what kind of message and what information to view is because we're taking that data analytics to understand, right, what offers work well with new customers to keep them on site for longer and keep them as retained customers. What do our existing customers, what were they doing the last time they were on the site? What products did they look at but they didn't buy? Or what categories were they looking at on the site that they didn't buy, that we can then recommend them to get them straight into the purchase funnel on site and create that personalized experience, even though when the message they go back to site, it says, welcome back to Comfy Homes, good to see you again. Here's some products that we recommend based on what you were looking at last time. And it's similar to, and I call it the Amazon approach. And I can't stress Amazon more than enough, because Amazon have grown, and the reason they do so well, and the reason that they are the biggest online retailer in the world and will continue to be, is because they know what you're interested in, what you're searching for. So the next time you're on Amazon, and it's why I get parcels every other day to my house, and I'm happy to admit that, is because they tailor my experience to me based on what they know that I'm interested in buying, and eventually they get me.
Yeah. And I think for me, the standout thing that you mentioned there when you segued into that was, you said, we've spoken about budget. And for anyone who doesn't know how important data analytics is, it all comes back to budget in terms of knowing where to invest your money on what's working. And I think, I mean, I've definitely seen with our clients more the kind of final quarter of the year, definitely more and more people saying, can I get more insights into what my audience are doing, what people are doing? Because if you're having to look at making budget cuts, you need to know what is working and what not, and where to invest your budget, because now is more important than ever to be able to really get under the skin of that and go, if we're investing in something, it needs to work. You know, just before we started the podcast, we were looking at the figures of our views, you know, on both the vodcast and the podcast, because we would, if no one was watching the videos but everyone was listening to the podcast, we could know we will no longer invest in the video side because that area isn't working. And that is why it's so important, because we could channel budget into something else. Obviously that's not the case, because all we do is talk about video. We know how important it is. And we're seeing that for us too. You know, video is the best channel for this, you know, this episode that we're doing, but the podcast that we're doing, but absolutely understanding the analytics so you know where to spend your money and what's working and what's not.
When I did that poll, and we can probably get through a couple of trends that I want to discuss in 2021, is when it came back as other, which was 17%, it was, you know, improving, working faster, quicker, automation. Mm-hmm. It was topics around that, such as one response was, improving productivity.
Yeah.
So one trend that I see happening over 2021 is automation, so working smarter and shorter and not longer. And that will happen across digital, that will happen in terms of personal businesses, in terms of how they get their employees to work. And that's investing in, platforms like Trello, your, Monday.com, your Slacks, etc. But from an automation, from a digital marketing perspective, I think from our point of view, it's budgets are tight. We need to introduce more automation and working smarter and shorter to give more value to clients, but not at high agency fees. Yeah. And I think when you can onboard more clients in a way where you're working harder and smarter in a shorter space of time, and then it's more affordable for businesses and still get the same output, that's an element from our personal point of view, something we're trying to invest in, which is why we invest in Pure Clarity, which is why we're investing in AR. It has nothing to do with our abilities to be able to do SEO, PPC, and social media. So you might think, well, why are we investing into AI and personalization? Because the data from that allows us to work smarter, harder, and better to target the audience more effectively. So it kind of gets rid of the guesswork, as I call it. Another thing you kind of mentioned there was obviously another trend I want to kind of pick up was obviously podcasts and vodcasts. We are doing podcasts and vodcasts right now. This is a recorded vodcast. I love the vodcast because I love being on camera. I don't know about anybody else. And the podcast is something that's really risen because we've had more time to be at home and listen. I'm actually going to ask everyone right now, obviously with the exception of Bobble Pod being our favourite podcast, and I hope it is, even though we're all co-hosts, is what is your number one podcast right now and why that you like to listen to?
Can I shamelessly plug another one that I do?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I also run another podcast called the North Star Podcast, which is it's less kind of marketing focused, but more generally like business and career focused. It's the terminology of the North Star is about being a guiding light, finding your purpose. So that's something that we're recording. But generally, I like to flick in between. I'm subscribed to about 20, and I'll just look at what's on, what takes my fancy that day. I quite like the Boss Babe podcast, but they're speaking to a lot of inspiring women and stories in business. I really enjoyed that, and there's one that I listen to as well called 0 to 7 Figures, and it's all about that millionaire mindset as well. So, but I do flick between quite a few, but I only listen to business. It's either like business or marketing related podcasts. That's my preference of the type of thing I like to consume.
What about you, Anush?
Yeah, it's so interesting, but you will not maybe be surprised. I'm usually hearing podcasts connected to videos. So one of them I want to pick up is called The Business of Video, and it's by Owen and Nick. They are usually discussing everything about videos. And even though I am all the time in these videos, you need to be all the time on top and see maybe there are some new ideas that you need to pick up because everyone usually on this, and something new and trendy need to be always considered. What
about you, Manny?
There's actually one podcast that I listen to religiously more than, and I think I might even be her stalker right now. It's Katie Leeson's I Shouldn't Say This, But I am so addicted to her content and her podcasts. The one that I was watching, just listening to actually the other day was Active Procrastination. And realise I'm a bit of a procrastinator myself. But yeah, I actually love that because it's more, even though some of it is digital, it's more in terms of obviously as a business owner, as a leader, someone who's responsible for a team, it's understanding the mental side of consumers, the insights on what we can do, and the insights I get from that, I find I am implementing more day in day out. So I actually find that that's probably my number one podcast right now.
Do you know what? I love that because that's something I talk about and I say to my team and encourage people to listen to podcasts is whenever I listen to a podcast, I'm inspired at the end and I'm making notes and it's giving me an idea, and it's not necessarily something that they have exactly said, but it's something that they've sparked an idea about within me. And, I think that's what we hope to achieve with this as well is anyone listening to this episode particularly is going to have loads of top tips and trends that they can look into for next year, for 2021 when the episode goes out, but is for them to take away and go, what of that could I take and action into my business? And, if there's one thing that I could start doing, what would it be? Because we've covered so many things here in terms of, I think it's quite apparent, anyone that's listened to every episode will know we've heavily focused on video every time, and it's unintentional, but we're talking about marketing, we're talking about the future, and we end up talking about video because it's the way things are going. So absolutely, that is going to continue to be a top trend, but there are so many other areas that people can get into, whether it's try doing a podcast or listening to, it doesn't mean you have to create a podcast, but podcasts are around to stay. So start listening to them, and looking at other areas like your data analytics. There's so many different things that people can be inspired by and look into implementing as part of their strategy next year.
Yeah, I think when you realise that your customers would be, or your ideal consumers might be listening to podcasts across Apple and Spotify, especially on the free platforms, offer an opportunity for advertisements.
Yeah, just a small tip for those who want to start with podcasts, vodcasting, or even just starting with vlogging. Consider that your content is the most important part. So because people listening you, because they want to learn from you. So as soon as your content is very educational and informative, they will continue following you. So that's the most important part for this moment. Even though it's important to have like really good quality video or a good microphone as we have, but at the same time, you need to consider mostly the content than all the other equipments.
Absolutely. And, I think that's a good time. I think there's only one trend we haven't covered that I can cover really quickly in terms of that piece around the content. I mentioned earlier around brand activism and conscious consumers, and I think that all links into having a message that resonates with your audience. So whether you're using that message on video, on a podcast, on social media, on TikTok, on any of the areas that we've covered, this is something that is becoming more and more important. Is consumers are savvier than ever. They're more conscious. They want to see the companies that they're investing in through making purchases being more conscious about causes that matter to them. So whether that be, climate change, plastic pollution, any of these things, it's really, really important for brands to make sure they're communicating to their audience how they are helping, towards an important cause. And I think that's something that if a brand is looking at getting started in terms of looking at these trends, what do I do? Well, think about what your message is. What do you stand for as a business? Because if you lead with that type of messaging, you're always going to resonate with someone. If